Welcome to Between Authors. I'm your host, author Adrian Lopez. What is it that excites us as a reader? It's finding that book or author that you may never have heard of, sort of like the treasure hunt for a reader. The goal for my podcast is to bring to you either those authors or those books that you may never have found, but may be the treasure you've been hunting for all along. Today, on episode 57, I bring to you author Rhonda Parker Taylor. We're going to go over a little bit about who she is, what she's published, what she's working on, and maybe what her plans are for the future. Welcome to the show, Rhonda.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to have a good, interesting conversation and engagement with your readers and you, because reading is all about learning and growing and escaping to another world. And sometimes we forget just how important that is, just for our own peace.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have you here today as well. And yeah, it's really, the connection to the reader with the author is the most important in the story, right? And that's kind of why I like to do this, is because, seeing the author as a person, not just that name that's on the book, and seeing why they wrote the stories, what the stories mean to them, what the process means to them, sometimes will strengthen that connection to the readers. And this is why I enjoy doing this, because I love these conversations. I love hearing why, authors like yourself wrote those stories. What they, what happened for those stories to come about. What influences did they have in their lifetimes that led to this point? And for me, I just love all of it. I just love the conversation about writing and books in general.
I think I do too. And I think that for me, part of the reason, I've been writing for years, but it's all been academic. It's I'm a mentor for dissertations and theses, and at the graduate level. And for me, writing in other genres brought a piece of me and allowed me to look into humanity more and connect not only with readers but myself and the people around us in the world every day. So I agree 100%. It's all about the connection that you can make with others, and you don't even have to put a label on it. Just with others in general and yourself. I think that's a
Yeah,
wonderful way of looking at life.
yeah, absolutely. Why don't let's begin by, why don't you give an introduction? You did a little bit there, but why don't you give an introduction to you for the viewers?
Sure. My name's Rhonda Parker Taylor. I live in Indiana. I'm a Hoosier at heart. I tried to move away several times. Found out I ended up always coming home. So the plates in Indiana says wander Indiana, and that's why, because everybody seems to wander right back home. I'm from north of Indianapolis, a small town called Noblesville. So if there's any Noblesville viewers out there, hey, Noblesville, shout out. But that brought some complications and some drawbacks and some privileges, because when you're in a small community, you support each other so much. But that also means for you to grow as an individual, you have to kind of step out of that world and expose yourself or to other types of people, other types of experiences. So I had to push myself outside of those shells. I'm the first woman that in my family to go to college. It was not. I wasn't predestined to go to college and get a doctorate. I struggled academically most of my life, but then I found a mentor that kind of helped me through that process. So for me, I think if you were going to try to define who is Rhonda Parker Taylor, I'm a survivor. I'm resilient. And I know that to make it in this world, I have to be prepared. And if it's meant to be, it's up to me. I can't, yes, you can rely and ask for support from people, but guess what? It's up to you to make it happen. So I have to stay disciplined to that.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, it's really, when you want growth, growth is always going to happen when you're the most uncomfortable, right? So you can't stay where you're comfortable, where and expect or want that growth to happen. It's just not going to, right? You have to be willing to put in the work and go and make yourself uncomfortable, make yourself work through that to have that growth, right? So it's true. It's very true that there's that balance where you have to find where, yes, I love this, but I want this, and to do this, you have to sometimes leave, what what not only what what's comfortable, or what you've been accustomed to. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen, right? So it's a very great point. But yeah, it really goes back to, I always like to talk about the author's voice, right? And what every author has their own unique voice. And the reason for that is like you said, it goes from, influences, environment, how you grew up, what you struggled with. All of those things make you, right? Make your voice as an author, makes how you approach the stories, how the stories are presented and written. And it really goes back to why there shouldn't be competition between authors, because every author's voice is different. It's not the same. Even if it's in the same genre or same theme, it's just never going to be the same voice.
Exactly. And I think for me, it took me, and I feel like every time I write, that voice gets stronger.
Hmm.
And that, what, I become more clear on what I want to convey. So, for instance, when I started Crossroads, I really thought I was just gonna really go down the path of injustice in our legal system, because I had been going through and I was part of a crime watch and a community service project that watched the different trials and made sure they were being handled correctly and everything was, being equal, and that the punishments were the same. And so I really thought that was what my voice was going to be. But then I realized that although I firmly believe that we have to self-regulate, and watch the things around us to make sure that we are giving everybody every opportunity. My voice is really more about people. I love people. And I'm an introvert. You people would say my home is like a library because I keep it quiet, or light music, or I don't like all the. I'm not one of those big rowdy people, but I like connecting, and I like
Yeah.
that ability to look for the good in people, not always looking for the bad and the negative in people. And you'll find that in Crossroads, because even the ones that are on trial for murder, there's something charming about them. Something that you're like, oh, wow, I would never have thought that. Or,
Yeah.
and you kind of empathize with the different characters. Like, for instance, Billy Knuckles ends up getting in a situation that he has a choice. He either turns state and testifies against a person he's known all his life, or he's also going to get the same penalty. And that's a big choice for him. And I won't give a spoiler alert of what his decision is to do, but those are things that can happen to anybody.
Yep.
The wrong decision at the wrong time because they had the wrong emotion and the wrong action. And so, whether it's Paris Pennington, the main character who's a jury in the jury, or whether it's, Billy Knuckles, who's struggling with whether he wants to go through with testifying, you really kind of see that the humanity is all about the development of the characters and their ability to show that just because they've made some mistakes, or just because they're a workaholic and they haven't put time into developing other kinds of relationships, or just because it's a housewife that's just glad to be out of the house away from the kids, that everybody has the same types of emotions and needs and wants in their lives. And I hope that I relate that voice even stronger as I continue writing.
Yeah. It's really an excellent point, because as anything in life, right, you get better at it the more you do it, right?
Oh,
And every author will get better at their writing. And I'm not saying they're not great when they start. I mean, you may have a skill set, your voice is very on point or very clear in terms of what you want to do, but you will get better. You'll just get better at it the more you do it. And the other interesting point you make is decisions, right? Every decision, whether it's a character or in real life, there's a consequence, and it could be a good consequence or a bad consequence.
right.
But but you don't know, like you said, you don't know what leads up to that decision, right? It could be, something kind of a landslide of stuff that happened up to that point that had a decision maybe that wasn't the right decision, but that changes your life path, right? Because you made that decision. Or like you said, you come up with a fork in the road where you have to make a choice. Which path are you going to take? And I always like the correlation between real life and the characters in books, because it is those points, right? Those decisions, those events, traumatic events, obstacles, challenges for not only individuals in real life, but the individuals or characters in the book that really determine where everything goes, right? Because every one of those you make changes the path. You're never on the same path anymore because of those decisions, no matter the size, even if they're tiny, there's a slight alteration of that path.
And I found my characters took over. They ended up as I got to know them better, and they were maneuvering through each scene. They started to make some of the decisions because I got to know their internal core values and character.
Yeah.
Like what I thought was going to happen, and yes, you can outline it out. Yeah, it still kind of followed the outline, but I was like, oh, she wouldn't do that, or he wouldn't do that, or, that's not the way, the lessons that we're going to learn from this book, So I really wanted to work on my skills as I did it. And I think that I used my research background to help, navigate that, and then I tried to learn from others too. You can't underestimate the feedback of others.
No, no. It goes back to, for authors, when you write and you go back through and you change it, right, and you have different iterations of doing it, you do your self-editing. Sometimes you've read that thing, who knows how many times you've seen those same sentences, and you'll miss stuff. It's going to happen. You can't catch it when you're that deep into it and you just see it all the time. You're just not going to see it, right? And that's the beauty when you have others that can read it for you, or you have, say, beta readers, or people that you have that can give you that feedback, because you're just going to miss stuff. It's just natural. There's no way you're going to catch it, because for one, you wrote it, right? And then as you keep going with it, you read it so much that it's going to start making sense to you, because you've read it so much. It's actually you've made it correct, right? You
Right.
just gotta,
You don't want to give up. All you
yeah,
writers out there, don't give up. And all you readers realize what you're learning is kind of the internal struggle of the writer, because you don't want to give up. And you could be like me, and I wrote mine, and then I let it sit for the longest time before I even tried to do anything with it, because I think it was fear of of rejection, vulnerability, all of those things. Finally, my sister was like, "What are you waiting on? You've got to stop this." So, I strongly believe the support systems will step in at that point and say, "It's
yeah,
time. Let it go. Do it."
yeah. Because it is a big step, right? It's a big step to put your work out there, because again, for most of us, these are all passion projects, right?
Right.
We're not making money really doing this for the most part. Sometimes we don't even make enough to go out to dinner, right? It's just we're hoping that we make enough to be able to pay for some of the stuff for the next book. But
Mhm.
we all do it because we love it. It's a passion project. And it's a big step to when you have something that you're passionate about to put it out there and just say, okay, here it is, right? But it really goes back to you have to know that you're not going to please everybody. There's just no way
Mhm.
100% of the people that are going to read anything anybody writes is going to love it, right?
Right.
You have to be comfortable knowing some people are not going to like it. Some people are going to dislike it, and some people are just going to say, and then you'll have the ones that love it. But that's life, right? You're not going to get, that's why movies have some critics and then others that, oh, I love this movie, and others like, I can't stand. You're just not going to please everybody. There's no way to do that.
Right.
So it's one of those things where you have to accept that, but then you're also like, you really want everybody to like it because it's so close to your heart, something you wrote.
Right. And you just have to face the fear
Yeah.
and realize, not only are people, some people going to like it, some people aren't. It's about what you wanted to accomplish and that you wanted to navigate. For me, um, my internal struggles with not only academics and stuff, but just in life is what and it it's what motivated me. What I was like, I am going to write, a best-selling novel one day. It's something I have to do for me, and it was on the bucket list, and it was something that it wasn't so much that um it was that I wanted to prove that I could do it.
Hmm.
It's like all my life that was something that I struggled with. Today I still if you got a text from me, there'll be 4 typos in it because I swear that when I typed it, it said everything. Even with my glasses on, it was, don't let me send you one without glasses or with a glass of wine in me, or we're really sunk because I there's something about the way my brain is wired. I don't see it until I've set it down and gone back to it. Then I'm humiliated.
Yeah.
So for me, the biggest part of it, I can do a story. I like telling stories. I like, weaving, something that gets someone engaged, in a conversation or in a book or any of those things. Um, but it's just a weakness. Editing is something I have to spend a lot of time with. And sometimes people don't realize
Yeah.
that, it's not that first draft. The first draft looks like crap,
Yeah.
but and I don't even bother editing that in that first draft. I don't, if it bothers me too much, I might fix it. But I need to get the story out. Then once I get
Yeah.
the story out, I can go back and I'll fix all those problems,
Yeah.
And I know, all the rules and all, what things are supposed to be, but my eyes and my brain, it just doesn't function that way. I have to go back and fix that afterwards. I just because I don't see it when I'm doing it. That doesn't mean I'm a bad writer. And so all the people out there that want to write and they're like, oh, but I don't have the writing skills. You can learn the writing skills. It's
Yeah.
whether you can connect the story and the reader, with the reader. And like you said, it's not going to be every reader. You
Yeah.
just have to keep working on that skill, working on that skill, and working on that skill, and eventually it's done. My philosophy is 1 page a day, and it's done in a year.
Yeah.
360 pages.
Yeah, and it goes back to, it's a good point you meant that you kind of held it back. You didn't release it right away. And finally you said, okay, I got to do it, right? I got to put it out. And it always goes back to the thing I always like to say, and I think about it this all the time, is that regret is always going to be so much more worse than failing, right?
Oh
If
yeah.
you fail, you try again, right? You can have the opportunity. But when you get to the point where you can call it regret, that means you've lost that opportunity. It's not there anymore, right? And that's the worst there possibly is because you never attempted it.
Right.
And that what if is worse, always going to be worse than trying it and it not working, right? That you have so many of those in a lifetime. on different scales, little things here, little things there. It doesn't mean anything, right? When you
Right.
fail, you tried, you've actually made an attempt. But yeah, it's a tough thing. It's a tough thing to get to that point where you're comfortable putting it out, right? And
And I
it's a
would,
big step.
yeah, and I think that everybody that writes has a process that they do that makes it either successful or makes them put it away and not finish. And for me, it's having a place that's mine. That this is where I put everything that's my book oriented, and I can sit down and I can write, and it's interrupted. It's not, that doesn't get interrupted, because if I get interrupted I can't keep the flow going. So I have a designated spot, a designated time, and it's, specific goal of what I'm going to, and it doesn't matter what project it is. So let's say
Yeah,
I'm in the research part of it, like I'm working on a genealogical um, project that's very long term. It's something that I'm going all the way back to the 1500s, on a specific family branch. And my goal for that is I want to be able to write the story that of that family from the from that perspective, but it also be accurate. So I get
yeah,
up at 5 a.m. when the house is quiet, from 5 to 7, and that's all I do. This is Robert Hanna, this is George Hanna, this is, and I go through, and I'm going through finding every child where they're buried, what their jobs were, all the way back to, to when they came to the United States.
yeah,
And some of it from when they were in England and Scotland. But the purpose of me having that point in time to do it is there's no interruptions. It's quiet. I've made that game plan. I've designated that time. And then it still doesn't interrupt me in what I have to get done.
yeah,
Whether it be, getting back, with the bookstores, or for my present book, Crossroads, or whether it's, getting back with my students and on their dissertations, whatever it may be that I have to do during the day doesn't get interrupted for that research. Same thing with writing. I have Mondays is my social media time that I get it planned out and think about, what I need to, let people know. But I still have to continue to write, not only, for my next books, but also for my students.
yeah. Yeah, it's a good point because every author, they need to learn what works for them, right? You got to learn what you're comfortable with, what works for you. Um, there's a lot of videos, there's a lot of things of authors like I do it this way and I've done it this way and this is how I outline and such. And they're all good data points, right? They're all good data points to explain the processes or how you do it. But ultimately, it comes down to what works for you, right? Because again, everybody is different in their own way, and it's again, I always want authors to be unique, be themselves when they do this, because that is when you're going to have your best work, right? When you are being authentic to yourself, and it could be exactly like you're doing it. I need a set time. This is my time for everything.
I won't.
Nothing else interferes it, right? Or
Yes,
it could be where, yeah, some other people like, I can only do it at this time, and it has to be, I have to have this music playing, or I have to have this going on, or I need to have this snack while it is whatever works for you, because you want to be in the mindset that is the most creative for you. So there is almost no way to tell an author this is how you should do it, because there is no right or wrong, right? It's you, and that's part of your growth as a writer. You find what works the best for you, and you go with it, right? You just go through it. So again, it's always interesting to me the different approaches everybody has, because they're always going to be unique.
right. Yeah, mine is, I think because of my research background, I have not run into anybody that develops their characters the way I do. And it's not that they haven't developed good characters, because there's lots of good characters that I've read in books. It's just because I deal with so many um, medical and students, and I've been in the medical community, even though my background's in business. I use a soap note. So basically, when you go into a doctor's office and you get interviewed, they go head to toe and describe you. First, you describe yourself and they take notes, and then they turn around and describe you from what they see, every body part, right? And that's also your psychological profile also. So you have a flat effect. You're not giving, any emotion. You're not dressed appropriately for the weather. All of these things go in your notes, which creates a physical profile and a psychological profile.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't mean that they have a mental illness. It's just who you are. We all have a propensity for something. Me, it's ADHD. That's why I have, problems with, text messages, or, and I've never been diagnosed, but I have the characteristics. I have some of the characteristics. Am I on a scale? Probably not. But I have certain characteristics. So we all have a characteristic of something. Yeah. And when you find that out about your characters, it makes your writing easier. At least about that part. Because you know how they're going to react. If it's someone that's codependent, then they're going to always be clinging to somebody. If it's someone that has anxiety, their heart's going to be pounding, and they won't, they're going to get agitated when something's going on. If it's someone with depression, they're going to have some kind of a downing way of looking at life. And so then when you're in a scene and you're like, oh, I got that writing block, I can go back to that and say, oh, no, I don't. This is what they're doing, because this is what the body and their mind's telling them to do, the behaviors, the actions. And then the scene comes in. Or I go shopping. And that sounds funny. Go shopping. Why would you go shopping? Well, I can go on Amazon, eBay, and this is the outfit they're wearing. This is what their hair looks like. This is what their house looks like. That's the couch they're sitting on. I've already got that whole scene written out then.
Yeah.
So writing block, I've had it, but my struggles, and I do put music on. So let's say it's a dramatic scene, I might put something that's very dramatic on. If it's a love scene, it might have, more of a, I might put love songs on, or a good feeling song on. If it's, they're in a car, I might put something like Don McLean on, something that's gonna make you, or the cars or the doors, or, something that, brings back that summer vibe, going on. And then you seem to get past all that it's when you put the tension and the stress on yourself, or I move to another scene and go back to it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good point. That's a good technique for people when they do hit that wall, right? Is to do that, to go, I do a lot of poetry that I've done since I was little. And in poetry, you find a lot of writing prompts, right? It's a word, it's a picture, and you just write something about it. But it's those little things, is when you take yourself again out of that little moment, because for some reason you're hitting a blockage there, and you go do that. You go write something else. You go write an additional scene later, or you write something. Maybe like you said, you're thinking about the clothes and where they live, and you just write something about that. Maybe it's not part of the story, but sometimes that'll reset you, right? And it gets you back in the thing. It's, don't sit there and fight with it. You just take yourself out of it for that moment, and go write something small, right? Write a page or something. Right. And you it's amazing how quickly that will reset you and you'll come in with fresh eyes and be able to continue.
I listened for one of my scenes. I listened to there. I was like, oh, I just don't know how someone when they're upset would sound, or the rhythm of their voice would be when they're making a 911 call. And I'm like, okay, how do I want to write this? And I was really kind of struggling. And then I found this database that you could sit there and listen to 911 calls. That
Yep.
solved it. And
Yeah.
the one that hit me was, and it wasn't the person making the call was a young boy with a stutter, but it was an elderly lady that's like, boom, all of a sudden I knew how I needed to write it, because she had that break in her voice that someone with a stutter would have.
Yep.
So yeah, you just find different tools and utilize them, and then you're done. I mean, it's so rewarding too when you finally get to that final scene and you're like, wow, I finally got the story out. Now then you got to
Yep.
go back and do all the editing.
Yeah, I know. But it's an excellent point about the research, right? I always like to bring up the research because it doesn't all have to be super in-depth research. A lot of times it's like you said, it's simply looking up what clothes would they be wearing, right? What sofa are they sitting on? But it's important, right? And it's important for younger writers to understand that research is important, even if it's a small little aspect, because the worst thing you can do is take a reader out of that connection to the story. And if you start talking about something like you're saying, you wanted to make a 911 call, but if you didn't do that and understand how that would come off, and you wrote it a different way, and the reader, say, has had that experience, right? They had to make the call. It's going to take them out. They're going to go, wait a minute, this doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right.
Right.
And
Not authentic.
sometimes when you take them out of the story, they can't get back. They can't get back into it. And it's
Right.
the worst thing you want to do to a reader. So all those little things, even you taking that couple of minutes to say, let me go listen to a couple. Okay, I understand this. That's research, right? That's that little bit that lends more of that reality to your story for the reader and strengthens that connection for them to the story.
I think that the important aspect of research is it helps you stay motivated and helps you be authentic to what is a real versus something out there that is not something that's relatable and it's not realistic. It keeps you into the story, into your characters, and it makes you stronger as you're working through the story.
Yep.
And you can get in a mode sometimes that you think, oh, but I got to get this done, I don't have time for the research, I just want to get it done. Personal goals and aspirations are great because that'll get you to getting it done. But if you don't take that stop and moment, you don't get the content part of the accomplishment, because
Yep.
part of the story, developing the story and the characters, is not just for the readers to connect, but it's for you to connect and learn the lessons of whatever it is that you're pondering. And so you're overcoming things in the writing process too, and
Yep.
you're notifying yourself of challenges that you might be having, whether it be you might be writing about a murder scene like I had to do in the suspense novel, but at the same time, in the back of the head, you're working on on relationships, and you're working on, because you're living life.
Mhm.
You're seeing how people are connecting, and you're like, oh wow, I really need to spend some time with this person. I took them for granted, or whatever it may be. It's a continuous learning process and growing process as you're writing.
Yep.
And that's what makes it beautiful too.
Yep. I agree. And if you don't, if you're not, as the writer, if you're not taking the time to feel what the characters are feeling, and like you say, learn and grow with the characters. The reader's not, right? If it's not coming from you, if those feelings and emotions are not coming from you, and you're not connecting to it, the reader's not going to connect to it because it's not in the character, right? The
Right.
words can be there, the words can be there, but if you're not putting that into it, it's not going to be felt.
Right.
And you could have got it on time, everything you wanted to do, but was it the product that the readers are going to enjoy? Maybe not, because that part of it, that soul part of it that goes in the story when you do connect with it is lost. It's not there.
Yeah, because people know what's a human emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So if your characters don't have some kind of passion, or or lack of passion, because some people don't have passion, and so you might be developing a character that has a flat effect, and is going through life in a mundane way, that that's their life, and you have to make that real to them.
Yeah.
We're not all cookie cutters of each other,
No.
and so our characters shouldn't be cookie cutters either.
Yeah. So why don't you, let's talk a little bit more about Crossroads. Why don't you give us a little bit? We've touched on it. We've kind of touched on it. Why don't you give us a little bit of like a synopsis or summary of what the book is about?
Sure. This is the book cover. Can you see it? It's
Yep.
Crossroads. This is real important, not just the name where I'm pointing at it backwards here, but the crossroads and the railroad tracks. I picked this. I really think for authors, this is real important, that you're telling this story from the beginning in your book. This is on the outside of the cover. So everybody in at some point in their life goes through a crossroads.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, I picked the title of Crossroads because not only is every character going through crossroads in the book, but Indiana, it's based. I picked a setting that I'm familiar with. I picked Indianapolis, and it's known as being the crossroads of America because of the railroad tracks. The railroad tracks early on in history all crossed in Indiana to get to all the other parts of the United States, and the dead body is dropped on the railroad tracks. Um, so, um, so I tried to put a lot of symbolism in it, but if you wanted an elevator speech of it, it's about people that are going through life and they're just simply not paying attention of how their choices are bringing them to another decision that they're going to have to make. So, like, for instance, Paris Pennington's the main character. She's a workaholic, and she works downtown Indianapolis. She gets called to jury duty, and for her, as she's going through the trial, she tries to get out of it because she's a workaholic. She has to work. Get me out. Get me out. And judge says, prosecutor, no, that doesn't work in our system. So she's trying to get out of it, but at the same time, she's going through some developmental things of her own. She's realizing, wait a minute, life is just not the way she thought it was going to be. As she sees people struggling in the courtroom, as she sees this really a nice looking prosecutor, and she's thinking, why didn't I pursue, having relationships, as she tries to struggle with her girlfriend that's going through a divorce. She's sitting here just saying, wait a minute, what happened to me? But meanwhile, so that's the person that you're like, you kind of get, because that's like everybody. We're going through life working, but things around her start happening. And everybody's trying to figure out why. People start dying. They start getting sick. So it's like a game of Clue. Why is this happening to this individual? And it's endorsed by Meryl Hemingway. She wrote the foreword of it. And I think she summed it up best when she was talking about the fact that everybody comes to a crossroads. But then she ended it in her YouTube videos that there's a point in everybody's life that we simply just have to understand that there's a crossroads, and that even chocolate has an expiration date.
Yeah.
And every single character, Billy Knuckles in the trial, he has to decide whether he's going to turned state on his friend, the friend that's on trial. He's getting ready to go into a crossroads and go to prison potentially for the rest of his life. His family's there. There's altercations. They knew the families knew each other. Everybody's at a crossroads because different people have had different experiences in life, and they're trying to navigate these bad decisions. Or in some cases, they're the decision that they're going to participate in the system. They're all thrown in together. In one room, and they have to leave that room someday, but they'll never be the same again.
It's very true though, right? It's very true in terms of the crossroads and decisions, and again, how you're not the same. You really aren't the same when you reach some of those, when you have choices. Sometimes you're not the same person anymore.
Imagine being on the jury, and you see a young person, and you've just told them they're never going home again. That changes your imagine the person that might happen to. Imagine the one that has to make the decision. What about the mother sitting there? That changes her life. What about the victim's family? It changes everybody's lives get changed. But meanwhile, the action continues on because something's happening to the jury, and they've got to figure out why these people are dying and getting sick and stuff. So it goes on into how their decisions are also impacting their lives.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I do love the whole idea of the storyline on there. One of the questions I always like to ask is, if you had a favorite scene in the book, and I always want the author to not give away too much when they answer this, because I don't want you to give away any plots or something like that. But it could be just the scene itself, how it came together. You just love the way it came about, or it could be you loved it for a different reason. So, is there a scene in that book that you feel that way?
Yeah, there's a couple. One would be when I finally made the choice of where the body was going to be found at, because that scene is so important to setting the stage for the book. But the other one I think is the lesson, because I really focus on 3 emotions that happen when you're making decisions, and that's anger, fury, and envy. So each one of them, of those emotions, is experienced by each character at some point. So there could be an outburst, there could be an anger. So and I wanted to pull it all together, and I'm like, what could I really say about those emotions? And I did some research, and I really thought about it, and I like, well, Proverbs says anger is cruel, fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? Envy makes the bones rot. And so as I was writing those scenes and they were going through each one, I kept remembering that. And that when it all came together, and I'm like, okay, those are all motives for crimes too.
Yeah.
Why would someone hurt someone else when it's time to get a promotion? Well, anger, fury, envy. Why does someone stab someone? Anger, fury, envy. All of them. So why does someone talk bad about somebody? Anger, fury. So all of them. So I think that those would be the most mind fulfilled scenes and thoughts. And then the one that was probably personally awareness is there's a scene at a restaurant, and the main character looks out and sees the sun, and she feels like it's like a Jacob's ladder scene where you see him going up into heaven, and it was like the burden of her life was being felt at that moment. And I think that particular scene for me made me realize the importance of ensuring that your life balance is correct. And I really started focusing more on my life balance at that point.
Okay, that's interesting. On the opposite side of that, did you have a scene that was hard, right? And it could be the emotions of the scene, or maybe a scene that you did struggle getting it together.
I would say it would have been the first chapter. I had written the book, and I'd started going to the conferences like what a lot of authors do. And everybody that read it said, for this genre, that first chapter has to be gripping, and it has to get the attention immediately. And I wasn't really sure how I was going to do that.
Yeah.
And it took a while for me to navigate. I knew that there was a young girl that had been killed, but I didn't know how to bring it to life because I didn't want it to be a horror type of, I wanted it to be more like a Clue, Agatha Christie feel. So I didn't want to overdo that, but I didn't want to simplify it either, because when you're talking about a young girl that's been killed, that's at the age of around 15, that's a pretty traumatic thing.
Yep.
And so I didn't want to navigate that part too much, but I didn't want to lessen it either. I wanted it to be the right tension to where people felt it and understood. So I did it from the angle of the police officer. I had a rookie cop and a seasoned cop. And this was the first homicide scene for the rookie cop, because I did ride around with the police department when I was writing it. And I realized that the only way that they can really survive, what they experience, is through the other men in the force. It's almost like a football team. Every hit that they get hit, they have to have some kind of, so they have this camaraderie and bantering that, most of us don't have at work.
Yep. Yeah, I can see that. So I know you talked about the other book you're writing that's going to go back. It's like a family lineage story that you're going through. Is there anything else you're working on besides that? Most of us always have multiple things we're writing, but and again, only share what you're comfortable with sharing.
Oh, no, definitely. So I have a life balance workbook that takes the characters out of one and helps you navigate and work through any life balance problems that you might have. I did this with my classes a lot, when they helped them, because so many times you do goals and dreams for your career, maybe your finances, but you don't really look at your relationships, your home, your pets, your family, all of that stuff. I have a workbook that's coming out probably in another month or so, and then it'll have the Crossroads label, and then I have the second one of this series takes one of the girl characters at the end and takes through the fact that sometimes we don't teach young women how to have a voice, which makes them victim to predators. And it's another suspense novel. I've called it my writing right now. The written title for it is Chosen. I'm not sure if that will stick, but that's what that's what I've put as the title now.
Okay. And the other question I like to ask is it's kind of like a bucket list question, right? In your writing journey, right, in your writing career, is there something, and and it's a good question for you because you're doing multiple things, right? You have
Mhm.
the crime, thriller, suspense novels. You have the work-life balance workbook. You have the genealogy book. So you're touching on some different stuff. Is there something like a bucket list kind of thing as a writer that maybe it's a genre, maybe it's a storyline, something you want to make sure you do accomplish as a writer at some point in your career?
Yeah, so I think that because that, like you said, I have multiple projects, and that's just the nature of having ADHD. And so um, I want, I think they go together, all of them together, because I want someone to be able to read one of my fiction novels. And if they identify with it, there's a workbook that they can actually go and say, okay, I would like to work on my life balance. On the next one, on Chosen, I want them to want to have also a workbook where, okay, I need to teach my my daughter or my wife how to be more aware of your surroundings, how to how to protect themselves, so that they don't become one of the characters in these books. So I that is my passion, to help open up conversations
Yeah.
through the fiction, because normally if you go to a self-help or a nonfiction book, there's certain people that like that genre and they stick to that genre, but then they never read fiction. But then same thing with fiction people normally don't read the other genres. So I'd like to be able to navigate that, and a personal goal for me is have a book signing in New York City with people there.
That would
Not
be
one,
great.
two, we're friends that have shown up, and maybe one of those big signs. That would be just wonderful to me.
Yeah, that would be great. Um, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I really, truly enjoyed this. I love talking writing, right? The process of writing, the techniques of writing, and I love the differences between all the authors and how they approach it. So I really enjoyed
Yeah.
this entire conversation.
And thank you. I did too. And I am sure that, as you talked to the different people, because I know, as we talked earlier, I know that one of your authors that was earlier this year, Bob Gonzalez of Flicker in
Mhm.
the Water, he's a totally different genre.
Yeah,
We're from the same publisher. Meryl both endorsed us, so we end up doing podcasts sometimes together and different things. So we're both part of her book club, and so I can only imagine just how much you even learn and grow from all of these conversations. Oh, and your audience. It's
yeah,
been, I hope that everybody, that's been listening or that listens in, they realize that, this is just a truly blessed podcast for learning how authors navigate their schedules and how they write.
yeah. It's been great. I've truly loved it because again, I love learning, right? So I love learning all these different processes, and the most beautiful thing about this is really, again, I love bringing the author to the readers so they can understand who the author is, right? Because again, it's difficult when it's just a name on a book, or a name on the page when you're looking at Amazon. But when you can see why the author is passionate about that, when you can see why they wrote it, how they came about doing it, what influenced them to the lives, the challenges they had doing it. I'm always hoping that that's going to strengthen that connection to the readers, and bring them more of an audience, right? Because again, there's so many talented authors out there that are not part of the big publishing houses and presses, but they don't get hurt, they don't get seen, they don't get talked about, they don't get put out front. And, even if I only bring you guys 10 extra readers, hopefully word of mouth carries that through. But that's the biggest challenge we all have, really, is eyes on our product, right? Eyes on our work. So that's why I love doing this. I really love these conversations and doing what I can to try to broaden some of those reading bases.
Yeah, and I think that, for those out there that are listening to you, I think that people don't realize that, everybody just assumes that, you immediately you become a millionaire when you've written a book. Every local author starting out, well, first of all, we could go to one of the biggest authors out there, A Time to Kill, Grisham. The first book he wrote, Time to Kill, 2,000 books. And that's all it sold the first run.
Yep.
And that is the normal experience. And so as authors are out there and they're struggling and they're thinking, what's wrong with me? No, it's just getting that name out, and
Yep.
getting comfortable with the fact that, it's $5 at a time, $10 at a time, and one book at a time. And the passion.
Yeah.
And being able to know that in your real life you've accomplished something that a lot of people just say, hey, one day I'd like to.
Yeah.
And you've
But
done
you
it.
did it, right?
Yep.
You did it. Yeah, it's very true. But I really want to thank you for coming on.
Thank
I want
you.
to remind the viewers that I will leave the links for Rhonda's books or website, socials, anything that you want to give me to post down there. And don't forget, if you have a comment or a question for either of us, we'd love to see that and give you a response. And definitely don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification so you don't miss all these amazing, talented authors that I have coming on. Thank you again, Rhonda. This was really a great pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. I'm happy you're here today. And thank you, viewers, for watching as well. Goodbye.
Be blessed.